This is the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network.
We're gonna carry on and plan the sequel, because let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel. Ah!
Welcome back to Micro Queers. It's your weekly roundup of queer horror shorts, and I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking homophobic white rednecks in Ohio in BJ Colangelo's Labrys.
Yeah. So this is a short that was previously unavailable, and then BJ has made it available recently, so we decided we would throw it onto our October calendar.
Joe, I've never heard of this BJ person before. Who is that?
She's a mysterious woman. No. So, of course, folks will recognize BJ's name because she's all over the Twitters and basically horror shit in general, but people should know her from this show because she guested last year on our Phantom of the Paradise episode.
Yes, and if you didn't listen to that, she's also super active on Twitter. Active and also an activist. She's a huge activist for queer rights. She's got a trans wife as well, and she likes to talk about her experiences. Living in Ohio and just kind of, oh god, the things they face on a daily basis. It's sad sometimes, but then of course we get the occasional, boost of happiness because they have a good day.
Yeah, and if folks feel like we're giving a lot of personal background, it's because we know BJ personally. So this is the first short that we've covered where we actually know the filmmaker to a certain extent. We've interacted with BJ fairly regularly over the last couple of years.
Well, so I've never met her in person, but this is, I think, short or film otherwise, where we've actually, we have interacted fairly regularly with the filmmaker. Yeah. Anyway, so this is going to be kind of fun for us. We're going to have to kind of wade through the waters here, because I don't know, I feel kind of nervous doing it with someone that I know.
Sure, yeah. So one of the reasons that we acknowledge that we know BJ is because it does inform our viewing experience. But also, just because we know her doesn't mean that we're not also going to have a conversation about what does and doesn't work in this short, because that's the whole point of the show.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, Joe, do you want to give us a rundown of the plot really quick? And everyone, as usual, so the link for this is going to be in our show notes, and it's about 7 minutes long.
All right, so your, as always, brief plot synopsis is a young woman on her first date with another woman is forced to come to terms with who and what she has always been.
Mm-hmm. And the title Labrys has a meaning, but I think we should maybe wait until we get to the end of the short before we really go into that.
Yeah, so maybe let's just expand on what that plot synopsis actually is. So It concerns a woman named Jill. She is played by Madison Woods, and she is out on a date with Leanie, played by Venchise Glenn. And Venchise Glenn is a kind of lesbian that we've not actually discussed much on the show, because unlike what BJ has put to screen here, we don't see a lot of fat femme lesbians. We often see skinny, white, very beautiful, very male-gazy lesbians.
Well, and if you do see that type, they're usually not conveyed in a maybe a sexual manner or as an object of desire. They're honestly they're usually the butt of the joke, which is just Hollywood for you.
Right, yeah, they're men-hating lesbians, who could find them sexy or attractive, because heaven forbid we acknowledge that people might be attracted to all shapes and body sizes, right? And we should also acknowledge that Jill is a person of color. So we have a person of color, and then we have a fat femme lesbian, and...
Question?
Yes.
Is fat okay to say? Overweight, hefty, plus size? I'm genuinely asking. I just don't know if that's the okay term to say.
I had previously tried to find other ways around it, and I think the preferred nomenclature is to be upfront and say, yes,
fat.
It's almost like a reclamation.
I've seen Nay use that term a lot as well. So
yeah.
Okay, that works. Sorry, continue.
No worries. So these two women are out on a date in Basically a small town pub style bar. They are more or less shutting the place down. They've clearly had a fairly good date. You know, they're a couple of glasses into wine and beer, and they are the only patrons at this bar except for a gentleman who is only named in the credits as Captain Cheese Fries. He's played by Christopher Marinin.
So yeah, let's talk about this. We're also forgetting the Nora Dunn doppelganger who runs the bar, apparently.
Yeah, she is played by Alison Egan, and that's really the cast for the 6-minute short.
Yeah.
So the women are having a good time. They get catcalled by this guy who makes them an offer of cheese fries, and they politely decline it. He gets upset. They all end up getting kicked out of the bar, and then it's not a directly homophobic attack until they get outside, at which point Captain Cheese Fries does end up accosting Lenny against the side of his van, or her van, sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, it is pretty clear from the get-go that his initial antagonism is because he can tell that they're not attracted to men, or possibly not attracted to men, you know? Which is, of course, so threatening to his masculinity.
But of course, yeah.
So I think this is also another example. So, like, you know, we've seen a lot of shorts that look to have like really high budgets and they have a really good production value. This one isn't quite up there. It's honestly, it reminds me, at least in terms of the look and design of it, from what I can tell from what the budget might have been, of the the Backyard Friday the 13th one we watched a couple weeks ago.
Final Girls, yeah.
Final Girls. You can hear like the AC or the ice machine going. The acting is a little rocky, I think, but it does seem to be a labor of love. So it was weird. I caught myself again, because you know how I love to catch myself thinking things when I'm watching queer stories. I was very much like, the dialogue's a little on the nose, like it seems a bit of a caricature, but as someone who has paid attention to BJ's Twitter feed over the years, I fully believe this is probably an experience she has had. And also, we should probably point out that she did co-write this with Zach Schildwachter. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm going to run with that.
Sure, let's run with that. Yeah, they are frequent co-collaborators, so they also worked on a feature-length film that they made about wrestling.
Gotcha. Oh, that tracks. So, you know, I talked about how I grew up in like the suburbs of Houston, which was maybe a little bit less liberal, but I have lived in Austin, Texas for 12 years now, and it's definitely a bubble, and I think I just forget sometimes how small town life can be. And so even watching this, saying to myself, this dialogue's a little on the nose, it's a bit like, you know, a little cartoony, like, oh, look at the homophobe over there. I fully believe this is something that BJ and or Zach have gone through, like, personally in their life in Ohio.
Yeah, I didn't find it as stereotypical or caricaturish as you maybe did. Part of my frustration was that Christopher Marinin is the weakest actor of the bunch, so his aggressions, micro and otherwise,
right,
they come off as a little comical to me because he can't convey the proper amount of menace. Like, I don't find him a properly threatening figure, although I can see the frustration that you would have as a woman who's literally just trying to make a connection with another woman on a date, and you're having to deal with men catcalling you from across the bar. Like, this is something that women have to deal with all the time, and I'm sure lesbian women or non-straight defining women are constantly frustrated with. Like, men who feel that they have a right or a sense of ownership to intrude on whatever it is that they're doing with their lives.
Right, and I guess I can see where you're coming from with that, because he is a bit more of a buffoon than he is like an actual threat, which I do understand. I do think one thing we're also forgetting to point out, and God help me if you mentioned this in your plot summary and I just didn't listen to it. But Jill it seems to be recently out of the closet or recently dealing with her lesbianism. Or yes. Queerness, I guess.
I did not address it, so we are fine. It's an important piece to the short. And again, I think if you know BJ, this is something that I see parts of herself in here where BJ was always a queer woman, but she has talked on her social media and other outlets about how she felt compelled to mask that until there was a time when she herself was comfortable enough to come out. But she felt like she was forced to stay in the closet and play the part of a heterosexual woman. And I see a lot of that in Jill, who seems comfortable with herself, but she is new on the scene and therefore a little bit hesitant to say the wrong thing or come on too strong or not strong enough. So you can see that wishy-washiness. Like, I actually quite like Madison Wood's performance. I thought that she was the best actor in this troupe.
I agree.
And I really liked the banter between the two women when they actually get kicked out of the bar and they're walking down the street. Like, you could see that they were into each other. I thought that they had a good physical connection to each other.
I agree with that. I mean, it's basically a revenge story. I'm not going to use the term rape revenge because there was no rape here.
No.
I will say that I was impressed by the effects. So I just watched Hocus Pocus for episode coming out next week, and it actually reminded me a lot of Bette Midler's Green Lightning hands, and I was like, for, again, a short that I assume must have a really low budget, these little, like, magic effects look really fun.
Yeah, I would actually argue that I think the most care and effort went into that, which is maybe why we see some of the other parts of the short as, like, a little bit more bare bones, because, you know, you can make decent looking FX work with a low budget, but it's also, that's probably where you're going to spend the bulk of your time and energy as a result. And I do think it looks good.
There's also a really cool transition when the car is driving away and it wipes the screen. I don't know why, I just really, really liked that.
Oh no, it's fun. Like, it's a nice stylistic flourish and something where you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting something like that. And even like the fact that we end on a nice high crane bird's eye view, or maybe a drone. I think a lot of people are doing drone work these days.
Oh, I believe that.
But there's good stylistic flourishes, like even as Jill has walked away when Leanie gets attacked, and then she comes back, and that's when the green lightning bursts happen. And as Jill is moving, like, the camera is shifting and phasing to suggest like she's tapping into her powers and becoming who she was meant to be. And I like that.
So, okay, so let's tie the title into that then, Joe. So what are these powers and where are they coming from?
All right. So if we do a little bit of research, the Labrys is a double-headed axe, and it is tied to Greek and Roman mythology, as well as the Amazons and various other goddesses. And interestingly enough, it, in the 70s, was embraced by lesbians as a symbol of lesbian feminism.
And maybe this is too crude, but you've heard, like, I don't even know if it's a euphemism, because to me, euphemism is, like, a nice way of saying something, but, like, you know, when people refer to vaginas as axe wounds.
Yes, okay. No, that is a euphemism as well.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was maybe why, like, the double-headed axe was co-opted by lesbians as a symbol of lesbian feminism, just because it was, like, you know, two axes. Instead of the wound that the axe creates, they're the actual axe themselves.
I like it. But yeah, I mean, you said that this isn't a rape revenge. This is very much like a revenge in the way that there's like a righteous feminism that gets used as a weapon at the end of this short. I thought that was clever.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. But yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, I think it's a solid short. I'm happy that BJ made this. I have a couple qualms about the early going of it, but I think the way it ends is a really good note to end on. Joe, would you watch a feature-length version of this?
It's interesting because in a lot of ways, this is exactly what I think of when I think of a short film. Like, it's very much a teaser. It's just enough to tell a story and not much more than that. So in that way, it's nicely encapsulated and self-contained. I wouldn't mind a longer narrative. Like, it'd be fun to watch these two women pursue a romantic relationship. I wouldn't want a murder early in the film. I'd want them to kind of like build up to this, like keep the mystery and the suspense going. But as it stands, I'm also like, this is just a nice little 6-minute short, and I'm kind of happy to leave it at that too.
See, I do agree to an extent, but then I'm also thinking, I mean, again, because we like the Labrys, you know, it's tied to the Amazons, Greek and Roman mythology. I'm like, cool, so give me a Wonder Woman movie with like this newly coming out storyline.
So you want Diana Axwoon lesbian green powers, is what you're saying?
Just one, yeah. Give me Marvel, but this. No, I mean that might be a bit too like surface level. But then again, I think there's other things you can explore here that can stretch to feature length.
Sure.
I do like, I mean, we've seen, you know, superheroes and getting powers as metaphors for queerness. I mean, look at the X-Men films, right?
Yeah.
But I still think that there's more to mine there. But because superhero films are so mainstream now, I mean, like, you don't get many indie or low-budget superhero films outside of, like, what, Chronicle, maybe?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking of Chronicle as, like, a really great example of not low budget, but lower budget superhero films. And thinking about the capacity for up-and-coming directors to, like, capitalize on that. Because I do think that, you know, yeah, if you gave people $10 to $20 million and said, okay, you can't rip out the Golden Gate Bridge or anything, but you can have somebody kind of fly around a little bit. Like, exactly. You could do good augmentation of this story with a budget like that.
So maybe one day we'll get this queer Wonder Woman-ish superhero with a $20 million budget. But either way, I can see it working. I mean, again, I think it's hard to make it without being too on the nose with like, oh, superpowers is a metaphor for queerness, but oops, they're actually also queer too. But
oh yeah, 100% you would get like Black Christmas / The Kraft Legacy complaints from basically all of the cheese fries in real life.
But I mean, I think it's something that you could definitely do. But overall, yeah, I think it's a solid short. I'm glad we finally get to see one of BJ's works, because I mean, I've been quite curious for a while.
Yeah.
I think then on that note, we can cross out Labrys.
Yes, and cross out microqueers.
It was late in the afternoon when the professor and I took our way towards the east, whence I knew Jonathan was coming.
Jonathan Harker has asked me to note this, as he says he is hardly equal to the task, and he wants an exact record kept.
Dear Madam Mina, I have read your husband's so wonderful diary. Strange and terrible as it is true. I will pledge my life on it.
God preserve my sanity, for to this I am reduced. Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past.
I am in hopes that I shall see more of you at Castle Dracula.
Listen to Regarding Dracula wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm.